So I'm just going to show our hands in the row. Who has converted? And you read this actually got microbiology in the title of the Okay. What I'm going to be talking to you about today is a cohort that I teach to where none of them do, right? And so in that context, so this is a degree program where they don't really have intense lab components of microbiology throughout. Our challenge was, how can we bring in something that's going to be a set of learning opportunities for them to explore scientific literature, get lost in it, get comfortable enough with it to speculate about it. So if they aren't getting 4 years of undergraduate microbiological training, how can you become rapidly an expert such that you're willing to argue with people about what you think is going on? And I'm a geek and a nerd, so I'm both life science and computer science based. So if you want to call me a geek or a nerd, that's fine too. So definitely in my realm of exposure, you know, the impacts that we have through things like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the context with Big Bang, arguing about comics and this sort of thing is easily top of mind. So I actually have today with me remotely, Heiza de Almeida Mesquita will show you an example of the final part of this. So she's online and she'll give you an example of that. Stephanie Sand is also one of our compatriots in working this up over a couple of years. All of us are located at the University of Saskatchewan. And so this is in the context of not a microbiology class, but animal bioscience. So this is taught to fourth-year students who are either taking animal science, which would be sort of conventional production, livestock, agriculture focus, or bioscience flavor of that, which would look more like the natural sciences that you would think of. So these students go into these programs thinking that veterinary medicine is something that they're acutely interested in, or production animal systems or animal nutrition for doing diet formulation. They do not, to the best of my understanding, go in thinking they're going to be studying microbes. They may understand that microbial life is going to be important and relate to it, but these students have definitely not gone into their program to do microbiology. So how do we teach them that, right? The other thing I want to notice, so this is a 400 level class, it's fourth year, it's an elective, so they don't have to take it. We have to entice them to take it. And the only exposure to microbiology that they are required to have is that they will have taken a second year course, 3 credit units, 1 term. They could take that as a very conventional, you know, undergraduate microbiology class, or they could take one that's focused on food and animal sort of byproduct related. So the scenario here is like we created a term-long project, which we are affectionately calling the Microbiome of Superheroes. Now, the first thing is, like with anything they're teaching the students and getting them to be creative about, superhero isn't limiting. It's not meant to be. And this is me picking something for which I think you could have an infinite diversity of characters to come to. But rapidly, we want the students to immediately know if they have a character in literature that they're interested in a cultural story that they're interested in, everything is fair game, okay, for where the character comes from. It doesn't have to be a hero, it could be a villain. It could be somebody who's a civilian in one of those stories. So the first task becomes picking out a character. So what's this picture from? Could anybody recognize that? Speak out. Spider-Man. Into the Spider-Verse, right? So it's Spider-Man, but it's a representation that there is not one depiction of Spider-Man in the comic world. There are actually an infinite number of them. You get all of this multidimensionality for that. So you could have somebody who wants to study Spider-Man versus Noir, Spider-Noir, versus various forms of Spider-Man, Miles Morales, right? And the idea here is to just initially start them thinking about this diversity. So we're doing this in the first day of class as we're talking through the syllabus. They're shown up in this class, they've got this lunatic in front of them, and they've got all of these milestones between here and the finish line. I mean, I don't come across as one of the big, you know, cattle producers, poultry people, animal nutritionists, right? I am a weirdo in my department, but I like that. So we're trying to get them excited about why are they in this class, how is it going to be different. And so even if they are excited and they're in the class because they want it to be different, they're terrified about all of the work. So we're talking about this in terms of what has to get done. So I'll put this question to you as just a starting place. I want you to just give me some names as to some of the characters you might think are the most powerful character in the Marvel universe.
The one above all.
What?
The one above all.
The one above all. Can you? I'm guessing from some of the.
I don't remember back.
Remember? Okay.
The Living Tribunal might have been in Guardians 3. I don't remember that.
Okay.
Galactus.
Galactus. Okay, Galactus likes to eat what?
Planets.
Planets, right? So Galactus is enormous. How about so of course, it being science, we can talk about where is the foundational authority for this. And in the geekdom, there is an authority. It is Marvel, the Marvel universe. Who can tell me about this character, Thanos? Who recognizes the name? Who hasn't seen Endgame or Infinity War and is worried about spoilers? I actually had to catch myself once because one of the students is like, yes. Okay, well, I'm not sure how we're going to do this quickly. But just to give you an example of how this works, right? No, I have to share my whole screen for this to actually work. So in the Marvel world, of course, somebody's done this up, tombstone information about all of the characters. But what's really nice is they give us these numerical quantities, right? So they score them all so that you can, over the beer, arguing with your friends, talk about, well, my character could beat your character for the following reason, right? So they're scored in these different criteria out of 7. Okay, so Thanos is really important. He's really big. He's very powerful. He's very bright. Does he max out all categories? Okay. Does anybody happen to know the actual answer to the question, who is the most powerful character in the Marvel universe? There is one. And if you were just looking at the slide, you might have seen it a second ago. Anybody know that name? Hulk, maybe?
It's not Dr. Doom.
Not Dr. Doom, no. She's Canadian. She is Squirrel Girl. And so Squirrel Girl was invented in the comic lore for what you just did, for laugh, to get a laugh out of people. Squirrel Girl is ridiculously overpowered to the point of she just defeats everybody, but she doesn't really necessarily know about it. She's speaking ill of people, whatever you want. But this is useful with the students because I still haven't found one of them who knew who Squirrel Girl was before we got there. They might have known Spider-Man at first, they might have known Thanos. What I'm trying to do is give them very rapidly the idea that I'm not constraining your creativity. The other great thing that we get to talking about right away is citations, right? Comics actually have formatting restrictions on their citations. So getting the students to realize that, yes, this is going to be graded, it's going to let you go all sorts of places, you're still going to be required to format things. I'm not going to be wound up about that in reality, but I think this gives them a different hook to think about why they care about APA formatting or any of these things. We're thinking about the person who drew the picture with a pencil versus the person who colored it in versus the person who invented the character, right? So it gives them another way to understand why these things are important for us to capture. So the first thing that they're doing with their character is they need to identify the animal origin connection. So this is an animal bioscience class. We need to get talking about animals. And in my department, invariably humans don't count in most of that worldview. We do talk about it a bit, but they're really not meant to be talked about in public discourse or civil discourse in my department. So Squirrel Girl, she's interesting in terms of her origin story. So her animal connection is the squirrel, obviously. She has a genetic mutation in the way that the lore is set up. So lets her talk to squirrels. In most of her adventures, that's usually how she defeats everybody. She has an army of an uncountable number of squirrels who take over and defeat people, including Thanos. She's also got a prehensile tail. She's Canadian, so that's obviously more important. And she's by far the most powerful character. So what I'm also doing at this point with the students, we're talking about some pretty ridiculous claims, okay? And this is what we're trying to get them sort of comfortable with. How do you deal with making claims about the microbiome, especially in animal-associated health? And how do you deal with people who are making ridiculous claims about it, when in the microbiome space, that data may not be anywhere near as solid as Activia and Danone are marketing to you, right? But these people are worried about how people are marketing that to animal feed, right? And some of those studies are real. Some of those probiotics really do things on swine health and rumen digestion, but a lot of them don't. So we need to prepare this cohort for how to be critically thinking in that space. So the next thing that they're going to be doing with that animal connection is getting into primary literature. So this is trying to pull the idea of, journal club and this kind of work, except at scale, this needs to be a lot smaller. So they're going to pull out several primary articles that talk about the microbiome in that animal. So we don't talk about squirrel girl because probably she hasn't studied in depth, and she'll only be one representative host. So let's look at squirrels. They need to be able to identify, 5 or more of these. They're going to write some primary one-page synopses of these. So a modified and smaller version of the journal study. And what we're building onto through the whole term is that after they've got this connection to an animal, they're understanding some things about the microbiome and what people do know and don't know and the techniques that are used. We're building towards that space for the undergrad, senior undergrad, where we want to hear their opinion. And we want that as safe and defensible a place for them to say the most outlandish things possible. And so the whole point of connecting with these characters is there's no way I can prove that they're wrong, but we can absolutely critique each other on what their rational argument is for why squirrel girls' superhero powers are associated to things that we know about the squirrel's microbiome, or how that's not true given the fact that her genetic mutation is on this chromosome or whatever, right? It's getting them to apply the knowledge and demonstrate that mastery in a place where the speculation is the hook that draws them in, but that's not really what they're going to end up getting graded on that part of it. Okay, so I'm going to ask us to do something. I'm going to ask you to do something because we've done some group examples already. So with the people immediately around you, I'm going to give you a minute. You come up with a character and an animal connection. Okay, you've already done your introductions. Let's go.
Good, yeah.
Maybe off the. Usually I have no idea.
Making one up or choosing an existing. Making one up or choosing.
Do you think Squirrel Girl exists?
I know. Yeah.
Other people love choosing. Make one up.
Okay, the next thing you're gonna do, they have the wonderful internet that's actually working reasonably well. You're gonna want you to try and do the fastest predatory style survey of the literature for a microbiome study associated with that animal, and based on maybe the abstract, get one takeaway message. Okay, go.
East. Looking up all characters. Like 13 or here we go. It's got the I'm trying to find anything that looks like an animal.
I like it.
The name of the book, there were 79 pages, but I know it was
You got maybe 10 more seconds.
I'm not seeing it.
You're not reading this in detail, no matter how interesting it is.
No one looks like an animal.
Shark man.
Okay.
Like it's like how the.
Okay, now I'm trying to just do a quick rattle off of what the character was, what the animal was, and what's the takeaway. And I'm gonna start here, this sort of. I don't know why. We'll start at the back.
We're looking through the superheroes. We haven't. Page 1 of 79. We're still on the.
Okay, so what is a character that you didn't know of that you saw in the last couple minutes for the first time?
Phoenix.
Phoenix.
That was like one of the featured ones on the.
Anybody think there's probably solid evidentiary papers about microbiomes interplay with the phoenix?
Well, you can compare.
But you can.
Right, but you could see a way. Okay, you're already buying in. Did you have something about Phoenix?
The same one.
Yeah. Okay, let's move to sort of the middle here.
Curtailing the turtle tormentor.
It's a villain.
And there apparently is a lack of data for turtle microbiomes.
Okay, so what would you do as a student? If I'm gonna tell you, you gotta find 5 articles.
I'd start trying to
But you know.
phylogenetically related turtles or like species.
Or reptilians in general.
Sure, yeah.
So this happens in a lot of different cases too. How about towards the front here?
The name of the superheroes?
We went with the lizard.
The lizard?
Yeah.
And then we have nice papers on diets, gestation,
there's
and warming effect on the gut microbiota of crocodiles.
Okay. Do people know who the lizard is as a character? Okay, did the lizard start out as a lizard or a human?
He started out as a human, so then he was trying to fix, I think, his arm, from what I remember, at least in the movie. I haven't seen this. But he developed a cure, basically, that turned him into a lizard because he was working on them to regenerate his limb.
Yeah. So the students have done the lizard before, and so that gives them the opening to talk about a reptilian microbiome connection and a human Homo sapiens connection, right? And then they can start speculating on how they're similar or different. Back here. Batman. What's the animal connection? Yeah. Oh.
I guess the skin microbiome of bats helps repel fungi, so.
So bats need to hibernate crazy amounts of time, so how on earth can they not get sick and die? Is one of Joe's colleagues, Vikram, was the thing that he put to me and then kept asking me years and years and years every time he talked to me. So you figure it out yet? You figure it out yet? So Vikram Misra, yeah, people don't know that. Let's take one more from this side and one more from that side. We'll go with it. Go on. You did Phoenix as well. Sure. So Phoenix, you could go to avian connections. Yep.
We're having trouble accessing the paper.
Paywall?
I don't know, something, but the title was about a bacterial filter that protects and structures the gut microbiome of ants.
You can get some cordyceps. You can get some cordyceps there also.
You can get to cordyceps and you can get to zombie apocalypse. Yeah. Right. But with Ant-Man, right, you've also got this idea that Ant-Man, the character can become infinitesimally small or become micro level. So now you can talk about crazy things that are going on there. And one more from this side.
So we did Aquaman.
Aquaman.
We realized just when we looked at a fish, we got kind of inspired and just looking at fish, we decided to look at flounder microbiomes. And we found out they're different in farm flounder versus wild flounder. It's just the first paper that showed up. Yeah, read the title, it's about it.
So that's a really cool connection. So for this cohort of students, that's absolutely in their wheelhouse, right? Wild versus agriculturally housed. Thank you, everybody, for being engaged with that. Okay, so just to give you some examples of what this has done in the last couple of years, right? So we have some characters that are maybe related. Spiders. Spider-Man is easily the most commonly occurring one, probably because I show that to them. But we get things like Lockjaw, who's a crazy dog who can move things through the universe. We get Supergirl's pet cat. We get kangaroo mouse that I still to this day, the student delivered it so well that I'm not sure if the character is their own devising or not. Like the proposal looked like it was a real character that they were pulling from something, but there isn't a primary citation for the character. I think it was literally theirs. One of the students had actually written their own novel, and so picked up one of their characters who has a connection to wolves and sort of transmutation. And they looked at that, discussed that. Wolverine comes up a bunch of times. Somebody last year did Venom as a variation on things, so even going up out of the planet. Aquaman made appearance this year. Shark King, the Fantastic Mr. Fox, Black Panther, Rocket Raccoon, and Loki Gator, and the Lizard there as well. Okay, so in going through all of this, this culminates through a bunch of different things. It'll just go through quite quickly here. So they've got a proposal document early in the term, 4% of their grade, 2 pages worth of writing. What's the harebrained crazy idea that you've got? That's not what I'm grading, but I know they have something. I know that everybody's not doing the same animal connection. And they're already starting to get familiar with writing about this crazy thing and how do I bring that into a scientific sort of format of writing. They're going to do 3 single-page summaries of the literature. So we've got rubrics that we use for that. These will be spaced out. In some years, we do peer reviewing as a way to get them exposure to each other's writing and get some ideas of how other people are formatting crazy arguments about superhero powers or villain behaviors. At the end of the term, there's these 2 things, which are a project write-up, which we actively encourage them to use the other components to build on. It's not self-plagiarism, but it's building on their work clearly because this is all tied together. And then the last part is a presentation part, which I'm going to jump over and ask Heiza, who's online, if she would please help show us her example of this. So Heiza is actually to a couple of people in the room. Heiza de Almeida Mesquita is in my group, running and keeping it straight in the lab. Her background's in engineering and in veterinary microbiology. And as soon, I think, Heiza, the first time you heard about this experiment, this was the character that you were obviously going to talk about. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah. So Eevee is one of the Pokemons from the first generation. And what's different about Eevee is that it's the only Pokemon that has 8 different evolutions and perhaps even more that we don't know about. So Eevee is the evolution Pokemon, and it is said on the Pokédex, which is where we get all of the true scientific information about Pokemon, that Eevee has an unique and unstable DNA, and that allows it to adapt to its environment by changing its forms and abilities to match and thrive the environment it's in. So if we consider Eevee a holobiome, then the unstable DNA can be referring to its gut microbiome or skin microbiome or whatever other microbiome we want to pursue our research in. So Eevee has currently 8 different evolutions, and each one of them can be tied to different biological aspects. So for Eevee to evolve into Sylveon, it needs a high level of friendship, which brings us to nature versus nurture. For the evolution to be Umbreon or Espeon, it needs to be done at a certain time of day or night, which brings us to the circadian rhythm. And for Leafeon, Glaceon, Jolteon, Flareon, and Vaporeon, it needs to be exposed to a certain stone or rock, which would make it the environment surrounding it. So Eevee is described as a fox, cat, rabbit, dog, so we can assume it's a small mammal of sorts. And we know that the skin and gut of wild mammals respond to different environmental cues, as was showed in this first paper that I have here on my slide, but also that the selection for environmental variants can change the gut microbiome that helps drive animal resilience. So based on these 2 papers, I put together a list of bacteria that Eevee would have in abundance, but also that a list that would not be present as much in its gut microbiome to allow Evie to be this sort of jack of all trades regarding environment. However, I decided to focus on Sylvian. So since we are considering Evie as a holobiome, we should also consider it to be under the monotreme umbrella, since all Pokemons come from eggs. But I do believe that as a mammal-based Pokemon, it would be breastfed by its mom. And because Sylveon requires this high level of friendship, we can enter on the rabbit hole that is the microbial gut, the gut microbiome, sorry, and the oxytocin regulation that we have been seeing can be done by the microbes and the gut-brain axis. So these 3 papers showed how different bacteria can induce low anxiety behavior or reduce corticosterone and increase oxytocin in the gut microbiome. So I do believe that Sylveon's gut microbiome would have a large amount of Mojibacterium as well as Lactobacillus rhamnosus and L. reuteri. But because Evie has all these possibilities, I couldn't just focus on one. So I have this magical slide where I could kind of find the justification for each one of these evolutions, but I just picked Sylveon to focus on for today. So those were my 5 minutes. I am in time.
And I'll just let you know that we did have a couple chuckles in the room of people who got the monotreme while we go to platypus for explaining. I will try to share back and just close up here. So I'm not going to go through the rest of the elements, but the idea here is that we have some pretty conventional exercises that we'll do with the students, but we're trying to catch their brains on and set them alight on the first day of class. So the feedback from the students is otherworldly in terms of they love this. This is the best class that they've had. The ones who've gone on to vet school are finding me in the hallways if I'm near where Joe lives, and making sure that I hear about this. What we're also talking about in the rest of the class is that by the time that they're looking at their literature, we're starting to talk about what are these crazy technologies that are being used to understand the microbiome dynamics. We're talking about some of the animal system experiments that are showing how, some of these lactobacilli can cause things to happen through the gut-brain axis. And the students are buying in completely on how to follow this very, very set of a different field of science exploring things. They're invested in it because they're trying to see how it could connect to their project or just generally have their curiosity wrapped up. So I will just wrap us up there with a picture of our last 2 cohorts. So the level of engagement from everybody has been beyond my wildest dreams. The class size here is small, so this can be done at a reasonable scale, but I am constantly looking at ways to try and scale this up if we could get different levels of involvement. So that's where I'll wrap up. Thank you.